Before you can become a charismatic man, you first have to go through phases of being a cringe man. The cringe comes before the charisma. This is something that you can't avoid. It is inevitable, and it's going to suck when you do end up being cringe, either in your words, in your feelings, or in your thoughts when you are going to talk to girls, when you're on a date with a girl and there's an awkward pause and you don't know what to do, when you can tell that a girl likes you but you're not really sure what to do next, so you try to give her a kiss, or you try to invite her home, or you're texting a girl and you don't know exactly how to text her back, and at some point the way that you express yourself ends up being cringe. Now, it can be cringe and still work, or it can be cringe and not work. Okay, so cringe does not always reflect the truth of the matter, because cringe is just a feeling. Cringe is just it's a pressure that you feel because you don't know what's going on, but you're assuming it's bad because you're feeling a negative feeling. But as you are learning to be this charismatic guy, you're going to have periods where it feels cringe, but it actually isn't. But the only way that you're going to know is if you push through that feeling and you decide to act anyways. Just like with fear, right? Being courageous is not the absence of fear. It's having fear and still doing something about it. When you are feeling cringy about, should I go and talk to girls? You know, maybe you've never done a random approach to a girl who's just, walking around on the street, getting off of work, or you're at a bar or a club or a party, and you think to yourself, okay, I have a negative feeling, I have an anxiety, I have an uncertainty, a doubt, a fear, and because of this negative feeling, well, there must be something true behind it. But it's not always true. However, it is sometimes the truth, right? That feeling of cringe, that social anxiety, that fear, sometimes it's actually a positive thing because it tells you situations to avoid. That's what helps you avoid being creepy, making a girl uncomfortable, or making people feel uncomfortable, or making yourself unnecessarily feel uncomfortable. The only times you should willingly feel uncomfortable is if there is a potential positive at the end of it for you or another person, or if you're in a place of ignorance, like I don't know if it's good or bad, right? I don't know how to read these signals that she's giving, right? And as long as the action that you take isn't anything risky, going to talk to a girl for a few seconds on the street, no one's getting hurt. You're just going to talk to a random girl. But there's an internal feeling, a wall that is preventing you from doing it because you either fear, there's two reasons why you don't do something. You're either afraid of making her uncomfortable or making yourself feel uncomfortable, or some mixture of both. And I ask this question to a lot of clients. I'm like, okay, you're afraid of talking to a girl, doing, an approach. Is it more because you're afraid of making her feel uncomfortable, or you're more fearing your feeling of discomfort? And there's no right answer, and it's usually a mix of both, right? But you want to ask yourself, where is the more dominant fear? Sometimes it's, well, I'm such an empathetic person, I feel people's emotions really strongly. So if I were to go and, she didn't like me and she'd have that look, I would feel double cringe because I'd feel the cringe of myself being stupid, and then also her as a mirror reflecting my cringe onto myself, magnifying, squaring my internal cringe feeling, and it hurts, right? Or you just don't want to deal with the feeling that you feel. Either way, at the end of the day, it's still just a feeling, right? But it can be a beneficial feeling because it can keep you from doing something creepy or weird, right? But you can also use your fucking brain and understand that I'm just going to go talk to her for a few seconds. If she doesn't want to chat with me, well, okay, she's going to say, good. Trust me, if a girl doesn't want to talk to you, doesn't want to be around you, she will very quickly find an exit. Okay, there can be negative aspects to cringe and positive aspects to cringe. But I'm assuming that you are a normal functioning human being with empathy, right? And you understand that, we're looking to have good times with girls, not make a girl feel uncomfortable, right? So it's good that you have that radar, but we're going to need to challenge it a little bit and desensitize your internal cringe in order to push you towards becoming a more charismatic guy, because you're going to have to push through that cringe in order to attempt to be a charismatic guy in the future. And you can do this in many ways in your life in general that will also be productive towards your dating journey, right? If you've wanted to start a YouTube channel, make that first YouTube video. You're going to be cringe. You're going to look weird on it. No one's going to watch it, or people are going to watch it and hate it. Go to the gym if you've never been to the gym. You're going to be weak. You're not going to know what to do. You're going to have to ask for help. You know, try that new hobby you've always wanted to try, right? At the end of the day, fear is fear. Cringe is cringe. It's just a feeling. It's just pain, but on a mental level. And you have to go through it, right? Simple lesson. So how does it actually work once you have the conviction to endure that pressure and that pain of cringe, but then work towards challenging it? And the way that you start to challenge your cringe so that you can become charismatic is you have to have an experimental mindset. You have to have a scientific mindset of, I need to find out when my cringe was accurate. Like, oh yeah, I probably should not have talked to that girl because there was something that I was, deep down subconsciously, intuitively reading in her body language that she wasn't interested, right? But the only way that you would know for sure is if you test it and go talk to her, and then she gives you a negative response. You go, oh, my cringe meter was spot on. It was dialed at the right sensitivity. Or you go and talk to her, and she really likes you, and you're like, fuck, I was totally wrong. If I hadn't challenged my cringe, I wouldn't have had this moment of success. And this moment of success will then create confidence, because you get confidence through competence, right? And as enough successes build up, you get confidence in your ability to recognize when a girl is interested in talking to you, when you're already talking to her and she's interested in going on a date, when you're on a date with her and you can tell she wants to kiss you, go home with you, you can tell she wants to start getting serious with you. At any point in the seduction or in the relationship, there's going to be impasses, and you're either going to be fearful and not do it, or be fearful and push through it. But there's always going to be fear. And the way you get past it is by testing things and having hypotheses. So I had a client, I just talked to him yesterday, and he has some social anxiety, and his biggest struggle was thinking, am I going to be able to do enough approaches that coaching with you is even worth it? And so I said, well, let's find out. So we did our first coaching session, and the weekend before he had done 2 approaches. Well, his second approach, he got a girl's phone number, and they have a date scheduled for this upcoming Sunday. So pretty good so far. He's batting a 50. Then the first girl, I asked him about that approach, and he said, well, I talked to a girl at the park on Saturday night, and I was about to go talk to a different girl first. She was just waiting by the corner, and it looked like she was waiting for an Uber or waiting for a friend or something. But I had this feeling that, I had the cringe, the spidey sense, the cringe sense came up. And what was interesting, though, is she smiled at him. So he said, okay. And he was starting to challenge his cringe. But then he said, I saw another girl, and my instinct felt a little bit better about approaching her. Something about her body language, it's hard to describe at that point. So he went to go approach the second girl. I said, okay, fine. You did an approach. That's all that matters. And he went and gave her a compliment and said, hey, I saw you over here. I think you're really pretty. And asked her if he could sit down. She said, sure. Sat down and asked her, oh, what are you up to? Are you just like sitting in the park watching the ducks? What's up? And she's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. Saturday night, just enjoying a relaxing night at the park. Normal conversation, nothing fancy. Then about 2 minutes in, he ran out of things to say. And he got the cringe again. The cringies crept up. And while his cringe sense was tingling, he decided to eject. And before he ejected, he said something along the lines of, well, seems like you want to be alone, and I don't want to bother you. And she just said, no, I'm just enjoying a night at the park watching the ducks. And he took that as confirmation that she was not comfortable with him, because if she was comfortable with him, she would have said, no, stay, you're fine, right? That was his benchmark for challenging the assumption of cringe. So he walked away and said, have a good night. And then he noticed something specific, very detailed, that you normally wouldn't think about, and you'd assume it would also be negative probably when I tell you. He said, she didn't say have a good night back. And he said, I don't know how to explain this, but for some reason that actually felt like an invitation to stay. And I said, you're right. I said, but why? why do you think that is? But you're right. And he couldn't quite put his finger on it. So what I said was, okay, let's think in terms of the way language works, right? You could interpret that first statement of, yeah, I'm just enjoying a night alone, watching the ducks. So what I'm implying that I want to continue to be alone. It's not explicit and not 100%, but it could be interpreted. But then I walk away and I say, have a good night. Now, normally when someone finishes a conversation and the person departing makes a statement about the departure, okay, it's nice meeting you, have a good night. When the other person who is sitting down, who's being walked away from, confirms that and says, yeah, it was nice meeting you, have a good night. It's like a verbal handshake happening to say, okay, we're both agreeing to say goodbye, right? I know it seems like overly obvious and kind of nerdy to be pointing out social dynamics like this, but if you think about it, that's what it means. We're both confirming this is a goodbye. But when he said goodbye, she didn't confirm it was a goodbye. And it's a subtle detail, but his instinct, something in his intuition was like, I felt like I could have stayed in more, and something about that made me feel that was true. I said, yeah. So now we had two things that were actually edging towards he could have stayed. So the first statement, now you might be thinking, what the fuck? This is so why are you being so nerdy about this one sentence? Well, you need to have this level of nerdiness and experimentation when you're trying to fight feelings, right? A way that you can beat feelings is not by intellectualizing them, right? Because that's just a subtle way of escaping from emotions. But feeling the emotions. And then as you're feeling them, review them and go, is this feeling correct? Is it accurate? Well, we can look at the details of the language that we were exchanging with each other, and it seems like actually what she was saying was just a little bit of humor to when he first said, are you just sitting around watching the ducks, on a Saturday night? And she's just saying, that's what I'm doing, just sitting around watching the ducks. I'm not saying you shouldn't be here, but at the same time, she's also not deep enough into liking him where she's going to say, no, please stay. You're amazing. You're so handsome. You could be the future love of my life. I know that's another extreme, right? But you have to challenge yourself. You have to say, what is it that I'm expecting from girls? So he should have stayed and talked to her, because these two signs make me think, yeah, she actually was. She didn't say goodbye. She actually wanted you to stay. Now, some of you could say, oh, well, no, she was just happy you finally left because you're such a fucking creep. Well, I've seen people leave comments like that. And my guess, these people, is they have such a strong internal cringe that any sort of risk in a social situation is just a death sentence, right? If you see someone projecting that hard their own internal fears, you know that this person has a lot of cringe that is blocking them from expressing themselves in any way. And it's sad because this person clearly has been rejected, ignored, broken up with, cheated on, betrayed, lied to, etc. enough times that it really broke them. And so now when they look out in the world, they see cringe and they just, that's cringe, that's cringe, that's cringe. If there's if you see people who are, on social media, YouTube, Instagram, and their main thing is just to shit on people and talk bad about people and call out weirdness and awkwardness, and especially from a perspective of moral superiority, right? You know that this person is operating from a very, very deep place of they feel this own internal vindication of either someone who's hurt them in the past or themselves, right? They think they are cringe and weird, and so they're projecting this out onto the world. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm hopefully trying to talk to you and find that internal barrier that you have that's keeping you from taking any risks to being charismatic, because you have to tame that feeling within you. It's kind of like in Naruto when you have the nine tails that is been imprisoned within him, and he has dialogues with that beast within. It's a very clear metaphor, right? The beast within, the monster within. And you can't just shut it away, but you don't let it loose either, right? You have to find some balance, and gain mastery over it and friendship with it. Let it out when it needs to be let out, because it can be helpful, right? Because when I see a girl, right, you have this desire, I wish I could just bend her over and just ravage her. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but you understand that it does come off a bit aggressive, right? And some of the images in your head are like, well, I don't even know this girl, but I'm already imagining like fucking her throat and like coming in her ass and all this nasty shit. And you're like, oh wow, damn, that's pretty like strong, right? And you care about this person, and even though you don't know them, you would never hurt them, right? But you have this internal beast within you, right? And you have to acknowledge it and accept that you have this drive within you. And you could talk to her for 30 minutes and you guys can have a strong enough of a bond and trust that she's willing to just go home with you and suck your dick. But the only way you're going to ever find out if that's even possible, right? You think, what? Meet a girl and within 30 minutes she's sucking my dick or, fucking her? Like, what? That's not possible. Some of you might even not consider that in the realm of possibility, right? Well, that's because on some level you haven't had a dialogue with that beast within you, and you haven't acknowledged its existence because you're afraid of it for some reason, right? And even if I just used that metaphor of the beast within, you might be like, this is such a fucking cringe thing to say, the beast within, right? So I'm trying to find at what level do I need to meet you to find where your barrier is, because your barrier is somewhere. You might be very advanced with women, but you might have some very basic things that you don't know is okay with women. Like I have a client who's been with like 80 something girls and he's sleeping with this chick and she's doing kinky shit. Like, I want you to tell me stories about fucking other girls while you're fucking me. It turns me on that you fuck so many girls. She's maybe gonna set up threesomes with her and her best friend, all this nasty stuff. And he has a bunch of experience, and then he's asking me, is it okay if I like call her a slut in bed? And I'm like, dude, you're like operating at a 7 or an 8 with her, right? And she told you, I'm literally down for anything. She said this, her exact words, I'm down for anything except for blood. Like in bed, like BDSM. Like, we can do anything as long as it doesn't involve blood. Now for me, blood is cringe. Like, ugh, that just makes me uncomfortable. But hey, you two are into it and no one's getting seriously hurt, I guess. But I don't know, that shit's, for me, it's weird. See, I even have some cringe, right? I think it's a pretty reasonable period of cringe, but okay. But calling her a slut, like, dude, that's normal. You're spitting in her mouth and telling her stories about fucking other girls while you're smashing her, and calling her a slut, that's that you're wondering about. But hey, that just is one corner of his, 9 tails that's imprisoned in his heart, the 9-inch imprisoned in your heart. And it's something that hasn't yet been expressed, and he has some resistance to it. And what is cringe but resistance, right? If you physically felt cringe, what do you want to do? You want to shrink because you want to avoid this, you want to hide from this feeling. So where is your cringe, and how can we start to challenge it with experimentation? And once it has been challenged enough and it has been revealed as unskillful and unnecessary, then you can turn that into charisma. Because when you stop being afraid of being sexual, you know that you can look at girls and stare at them for a little bit longer. Not leering like, ooh, because that's a guy who doesn't have control either. He lets the beast completely out. That's not mastering, that's slavery. But also being afraid of the beast is slavery as well. Both extreme actions are letting the pressure control you. Whereas the guy who sees a beautiful girl, he's like, damn, I would just love to do dirty things to you. And looks at her and appreciates her. But if she were to turn around and catch him, he might look away really quickly. Or he might look at her, smile, and then look away. What is cringe and what is charismatic can be a difference of a half of a second or a couple seconds. So when my client was sitting on the bench with that girl, she may have not wanted him to be there. It's possible. That's one interpretation, like I said. But all the signs point to me, I think he was okay. What if he had just sat there for a couple more seconds and just allowed the pressure of that silence of, like, I don't know what to say next? She might have brought something up, because you also need to remember that you're not 100% in control of the seduction. There's another person involved with it, or multiple people, I guess. You're, having a lot of fun. But there's a girl involved there, and she has her own agency. She has her own, viewpoints, opinions, values, views, whatever. And she's going to be involved. It's a cooperative seduction. Now, the man, for the most part, is the lead programmer in designing the seduction. But there's also another person at the table, at the computer with you, designing it. So sit there and just being able to handle awkward silence is very charismatic. You ever seen someone who's like giving an interview or like giving a speech and they stop and they just think about what they're going to say next? If you don't see them visibly uncomfortable and you don't see them like, it doesn't come off as cringe. But if you see them being overwhelmed by their cringe, then you're going to interpret it as in cringe. But if you see them just like calmly, it could be even for a long time, you interpret as, oh, he's taking his time. He's thinking about what to say next. That is charismatic.
You'll know you have the respect when you can take a moment and still keep their attention.
Amazing. That was captivating as hell.
They're both the same things. In both cases, it's silence. But my client, with the girl on the bench, allowed that silence to overwhelm him. But if he had just sat there and just... He's thinking, I don't know what to say next. But it'll come to me. And I'm going to just stay for a couple seconds more. Could be 5 seconds, could be 10 seconds, could be 30. And I'm going to work through that feeling. And eventually a solution will arise. Or the woman, like I said, because she's involved, will bring something. Hey, so, what do you do? Are you working? Do you go to school? Blah, blah, blah. Whatever. Are you from here originally? And she might actually relish the fact that he took a step back and allowed her some space to involve herself in the seduction. And he doesn't have this frantic energy to keep the conversation going. Okay? So charisma can come in a lot of different forms and from a lot of different angles and express itself in a lot of different ways. But the only way that you're going to see what charisma can actually emerge out of your heart is by enduring that cringe and that fear of not knowing what to do next, not knowing what to say, or wanting to say or do something, but being afraid that it's wrong. And as long as your intentions are not to make someone comfortable, or especially definitely, shouldn't need to be said but hurt anybody, dude, you're just talking to people. It's going to happen. If you're on a date with a girl and you've been talking to her for a few hours and she's getting really close to you, you're like, okay, should I try to kiss her? Go for it. Worst is going to happen. She's going to turn her cheek. It's happened to me tons of times. You go, she turns her cheek, and your nose is just on her cheek, and you're just like, okay, this is awkward. You pull your face back, and you go, okay. Most of the time, I would laugh. Just go, okay, so that's awkward. Especially when it was at the last second. Like, you're going in, and they're looking at you, and they're about to let you get in, and you're like, shit. But then I knew, okay, that wasn't the right time. There was something I wasn't quite reading right. Next time, I'm going to try and read the signals a bit better. Because charisma is, at the end of the day, reading the signals and having as smooth of a path as possible, right? But the only way you're going to smooth that path is by falling into it a lot and then smoothing it out with the cringe. But eventually the cringe will turn into charisma if you're willing to go through the cringe. Hector Castillo, girlshades.com. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you want personal help with working through your cringe and making yourself into the most charismatic, seductive guy that you can make yourself, then I can help you with my coaching program. So check in the description below. There's a form. You can sign up to talk to me for a consultation call and see if we would make a charismatic coaching student-client relationship or a cringe one. We'll have to see. So check that out in the description below. Again, hope you've enjoyed the video. Please like, subscribe, ring the bell, go fuck yourself. I love you. Bye.